Hello everyone, good evening and welcome and happy early Thanksgiving. And welcome to our virtual wine tasting number 21. Somehow we have managed to maintain an audience through 20 of these things and everyone hasn't given up on us yet, so we're going to do number 21. Tonight we are doing the wines of Franz Weninger, who you'll be desperately unsurprised to learn owns Weninger wines. We have a rosé and we have 3 reds because happily, it is actually reasonably cool tonight, and this is the sort of night where you'd want 3 reds. I'm joined this evening by Erik Mercier of Juice Imports. Hello, Erik.
Hello.
Nice to have you as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. So you are the importer for these wines for not just Alberta, but you're basically the only person in Canada bringing in Weninger wines at this point, I believe.
They actually have an importer in Manitoba, as far as I know.
Well, I wasn't expecting that to happen. All right.
Nobody was expecting that to happen. But yeah, they do. Yeah.
Cool. That's really fun.
Great guys. Great bunch of guys.
So why don't you tell us, so we've got 3 very different looking labels here in front of us. For those of you just desperate to get into your wine, we have the wine that I'm going to pronounce wrong all night. So Erik, do you want to pronounce our first wine for us tonight?
Yeah, so the first one is Rózsa Petsovits.
There we go.
I believe that's the correct pronunciation.
I misread this label as Petrovits, like the first vintage we got this, like 3 years ago, and I've said it wrong ever since.
Yeah.
So that's where we're starting. Why don't you walk us through the 3 very different looking labels we have in front of us and what they mean?
Totally. So the reason why Franz has 3 different looking labels is, first of all, that he operates in 2 different countries. So the region that he's in, which is sort of Burgenland and around the town of Sopron, they all used to be one area. If you look back historically, this area used to be sort of like conquered by the Romans for a period of time, and then there was real Hungarians that moved into this area, like people that we would still consider Hungarian today, I suppose. Then you have the Turks that moved in and sort of took over some of this area. Then you have the Austro-Hungarian Empire that took over this area. And then you have a basically huge German influx. And so this area has changed hands so many times, that the border has changed so many times, that that his family's land actually falls on 2 sides of the border. So it falls both in Austria and in Hungary. And so for legal purposes, he has a winery in Austria and a winery in Hungary that are about a 15-minute drive away from one another. So it's very convoluted. So he has one different label for each of those sort of focuses, one for Austrian wines and one for Hungarian wines. And then the last label, which is the label that we're drinking right now, the Rózsa Petsovits, this is basically all his experimental wines. So the wines that he's not quite sure whether they're going to become part of his, standard canon, I suppose. He puts these like really wacky labels. I think some people call them Franz plays, because it's basically Franz just fooling around and trying to make something weird and wonderful. And so this, although it started off as an experiment like 3 years ago, now it's a staple wine that we get every single year. People just loved it way too much.
Oh, myself included, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so now it's just a standard wine. So, yeah.
I think the conversation Devin and I always have with this wine is, hey, Kyle, you need to order some more Rózsa Petsovits. I'm like, no, I don't. I just ordered 3 cases. We're fine. No, like, we're right out again. Oh, God damn it. Yeah. Fine. Yes, we'll order more. So let's talk about this. So this is a rather unconventional rosé. I don't think anybody who's followed us on this journey of 21 weeks would really be scared by this. But, if your experience with rosé to this point has been Provence and White Zin and you've got this in your glass, you might be mildly intimidated. Why don't you tell us the process for making this versus making, I realize we can't cover every way of making rosé because there's way too damn many, but versus your classic rosé that you might have in like the Provençal style.
Totally. So with a lot of wines these days, they're very heavily manipulated. So they're fined, they're filtered, they're colored, they're all those sort of things. And with rosé, because there's been sort of this move towards thinking that lighter rosés are better, people all around the world have started like charcoal filtering their rosé in order to make them look lighter. And so what we have in the glass is a rosé that obviously hasn't gone through that process. It's a little bit darker in color, but ultimately what they're doing is they're just taking red grapes and crushing them to extract the juice from them, and then basically chucking out the skins, using it for, compost and than fertilizer or whatever. So it's just the juice that's been running off of these grapes. For those of you who don't know, if you were to ever take a red grape like Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir, or any other classic red grape you can think of, and peel it, on the inside, the grape looks exactly the same as a white grape. It's actually clear. The juice of it is actually like white juice. The way that red wines get their color is from the actual skins. And so for a rosé, you just take red grapes, crush them super lightly so it doesn't extract a ton of color from the skins, and then you make a wine from that pink juice, basically. So that's exactly what's happening here, is they just take grapes, they crush them, and they're just trying to extract, just a tiny little bit of color, not too much, not too little, just a tiny little bit of it, to make something fun and pink and weird. So, yeah. There are a couple different ways to make rosé as well. Like something like rosé champagne is actually a blend of white and red wine together, traditionally at least. You also have the Sangay method, which is where you basically crush all the grapes like you're making a white wine, and then you bleed off a little bit of the juice. That's what Sangay means, basically, is bled off. And so by taking a little bit of this juice away, you end up with this light pink juice, while the rest of the juice that's still in contact with the skins turns into red wine, gets super dark, really powerful. Those are kind of the main ways that you have of making rosé, but this is just what we call like a direct press method, where you take red grapes and directly press them. So
let's talk a little bit about the wine in our glasses. So it's a little darker than we might expect. It's got lots of fruit, plenty of acidity. You don't particularly have much in your glass. What are you drinking tonight, Erik? I should know.
Totally. I didn't have any Franz Weninger on hand, so I'm drinking sort of like a duo of dirty and rowdies, because I thought, it goes with the fall weather right now.
It's very orange. That's very true.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, something to, I don't know, for the fall day. So, but yeah, for the Rózsa Petsovits, this is a really cool project. Like, I love telling the story of actual Rózsa Petsovits. So Rózsa Petsovits is Franz Weninger's grandmother. Apparently she's like the most energetic person of all time. So when he made this rosé, and it happened to be like super energetic and really lively a couple years ago, he decided to bottle it under her name, which is a sweet sentiment to begin with. And then ultimately this turned into a project to sort of focus on this region as a whole without the borders in between. So some of the grapes are actually from Hungary and some of them are from Austria, which is like quasi-illegal. But, Franz Weninger never one to shy away from, a little adventure. Because his grandmother was born in the same town that he was, but she was born in Hungary and he was born in Austria, because since the time that she's been born, the border has moved. Sometime again after, I guess, World War II, I suppose, is when it moved. So he wanted to do sort of an ode to her by blending from both sides of the border to sort of represent that dual heritage of being Hungarian but also being German-speaking people. Yeah, this wine is like one of my favorites that we get every single year. It's super bright, it's really fresh, it's really intense. A lot of people think that rosé is going to be like flavorless and meant to be neutral and just meant to be like chugged. But this is kind of the antithesis of that, where it's like, it's bright, fresh, and drinkable, but then also has a ton of intensity, a ton of complexity. It's made partially from Syrah, which tends to have a peppery quality to it, as well as a floral element. And I definitely think that it picks up that. And then the other thing that I always get off of this is like really interesting citrus notes, like almost blood orange, or kind of almost like grapefruit rind.
I can pick that up. Yeah, I think that's going on.
Yeah, almost like a botanical-y quality to it. So, yeah, like you were saying, every year we sell out of this wine super fast. We usually only get somewhere around 120 bottles a year for all of Alberta. So not a lot.
This year we got more, though. This year it was okay.
Did we get more? We might have gotten a little bit. No, I think we only got 26 packs this year.
Good Lord, I feels like I've sold 26 packs. This has done really well for us this year.
Totally, yeah. I think that you guys have had maybe like, I don't know, 12 to 14 six-packs of the 20 that we got so far. So, yeah, you're definitely winning.
Yeah, tell no one. Tell no one this exists. 26 packs is enough.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Now, Devin did touch on this, but I think it's such a great question. We're just going to ask it again. How much is tannin a consideration in a wine like this? Because obviously it does get some skin contact and it does pick up, along with a bit of color, it's going to pick up tannin. How much do we consider tannin structure in a wine like this?
Yeah, I think that tannin is underlooked at by most people, even in like the WSET diploma. So like sort of one of the higher levels of wine education that you can go through. Part of their tasting guide, you don't really comment on tannin on rosé nor on white wine, when those wines can definitely have phenolic characteristics to it. So tannins are part of a larger group called phenols that have this like textural elements on the palate, almost like tea is a really great example, that sort of drying effect on the palate. I definitely think that this has a touch of it, a lot less than what you get with something like an actual red wine, but you're definitely getting a little touch. And I think that in this wine it shows as, again, being botanical. It kind of reminds me of tonic or something like that, like if you were to do like a rosé vermouth and soda or something like that. Like it has that sort of little hint of tannin to it, not really piercing. There's also a common thing that any coffee geeks in the audience probably know about, which is sour bitter confusion. So apparently most people, when they taste something that's tart, until they really train their palate, they might accidentally mistake that compound for being bitter. And this happens all the time, especially with coffee, where people taste like coffee that's like bright and juicy, and they'll think that it's bitter instead of sour. And so this can happen with wine as well, where there's wines with high acidity and people will mistake them for being bitter. It just takes a little bit of honing of your palate to sort of be able to figure out which one's which. It happens to a lot of people, from my understanding. So I think that this has a little bit of all those things going on for it.
Wonderful. Let's move on to the second wine here. And hopefully the last time I'm going to ask you to pronounce this one. This is I keep calling it the Gneisz És Csillám, but I assume that's very wrong.
No, you're pretty close. Yeah. Gneisz És Csillám.
Gneisz És Csillám. That's not close. That's just you being nice.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's pretty close. It's closer than I was when I went there. When I went and Franz pronounced it for me, I was like, cool. I've been selling this wine for like 8 months now, pronouncing it entirely wrong. But basically, Gneisz És Csillám is like the Hungarian dialect for gneiss or gneiss, which is like a soil type. Basically, it's a type of rock, and mica schist is Csillám. But the funny thing too is that like even if you look in like a Hungarian dictionary, it actually doesn't have a translation for Csillám, because it's like such a local like word for particular this type of mica schist that it might as well be a made up word, frankly. And the most frustrating thing of all time is that this wine used to just be called Cuvée Franz, which is a million times easier to sell than Gneisz És Csillám. So we were kind of like heartbroken when he changed the name of this. We're like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a pain in the butt to sell. But now it's our #1 selling wine in the entire portfolio.
Doesn't surprise me. It's just such a delightful wine. Totally. Now, someone back in the comments, I think it might have been Laverne? No, it was Don Vickers. Did point out that we have tasted 2 of these before, way back. I think you are our very first video guest ever. We actually did the Gneisz És Csillám, and we did the Vom Kalk. We were sold out of the Kékfrankos. That didn't show up till a couple of weeks later, and this didn't show up until summer. So why are we doing these again? Well, for one very good reason. I wanted to do a vinegar tasting, and without going literally below cost, this was the absolute only way I could make this work. I looked at swapping this out a couple of times, looked at moving this around or this around. No. For me to do this and even cover credit card fees at 85. Speakers, thank you for advertising this on your own site as 80. That was lovely. And you too, Aaron. I'm sure you did. But I think we're making like $1.30. This is, you're never going to see this deal again, but I'm really glad you're here for it. So that is why we're repeating them, is to keep, I don't ever want to go above 85 for the tasting unless we do Craig's idea of doing a proper masterclass. 85 is my absolute hard limit of how expensive I'll let these go, and I like to keep most of them at 80, so that's why we are doing some repeats. Is it just anything else would be below cost? So all that said, I'm just not even going to say it. This Cuvée Franz, walk us through it.
Cuvée Franz, totally. So the whole idea was that when Franz was making Cuvée Franz, at that point he was still he hadn't really like solidified his ideas about how he wanted to make wine and what he wanted the company to be. He took over for his father's winery, who's also conveniently named Franz Weninger, just to make my life super easy. And his father had planted grape varieties like Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, and basically Franz, like, he doesn't really want to have anything to do with those grapes. He's like, cool, my father planted those because he wanted to be known internationally, and basically like the benchmark of a region being able to make good wine is, can you make Pinot Noir and can you make Cabernet Sauvignon? And so he was like, I wanted to prove that Austria can make those grape varieties, so I'm going to plant them. Versus Franz Weninger the younger is like, no, I want to prove that we can make world-class wines out of our own grape varieties. So out of Kékfrankos / Blaufränkisch, so their indigenous grape variety. There's no reason we should be using like the French grape variety as the benchmark in our country. That just doesn't make sense. Our grapes grow really well here. They've evolved to live in our climate and on these soils. And so his focus is on those things. So he basically took these grape varieties that were making really expensive wines for them. So like their Valtellina, which is like, sells for not a cheap amount of money, like $50 or whatever. And he took all those grapes and basically declassified them into his entry-level wine and decided to focus on soil types for his entry-level wines. So that way he didn't have to advertise the grape on the bottle. He didn't have to talk about the fact that he was using Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. He didn't have to talk about those things. He's like, no, this is about the soil. So he took basically all the grapes grown on gneiss and mica schist and bottled that as Gneisz És Csillám. The Vom Kalk that we'll taste afterwards is basically from limestone. So it's all the grapes that were grown on limestone that didn't fit into sort of like the rest of the single vineyard wines. He also does one called Von Lem, which we don't bring in, at least not as of yet, which is grown exclusively on clay. And so the focus is here, at least on soil type. He wants you to taste what the soil tastes like more so than the actual grape variety. And so gneiss and mica schist for me, it tends to promote minerality in the wine. And minerality is a hard thing to describe, but it's things that aren't fruits and aren't flowers. It's like this sense of, in this particular wine, like it honestly smells like crushed granite and like, black pepper and like gunpowder and all these things that are just remind me of rocks, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful characteristics that a wine can possibly have, and not normally a thing that you can find in a wine of this price, frankly.
No,
normally at this
no,
price,
that's definitely true. It's fruit and alcohol at $21.95 sort of thing. Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah, exactly. Versus this, like, insanely complex.
I do want to just jump in with a couple of questions. One from the audience. Is Franz using American rootstocks on most of his vines, like most European vineyards? Is there a phylloxera problem in Austria and Hungary as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything in Austria and Hungary is planted on North American rootstock.
Cool. Yeah. And then the question I was going to jump in with here, just before we get on to the Kékfrankos, I know that his wines are predominantly about the soil type, predominantly about what they're grown on, but they're using some grape varieties that I think a lot of people here won't have heard of before, such as Weingart, Saint Laurent, and Kékfrankos or Blaufränkisch. Do you want to walk us just really short through those three grapes that we're going to see feature very heavily through the next three wines?
Totally, yeah. So the main grape of the estate is definitely Blaufränkisch / Kékfrankos. They're technically the same grape variety. I've heard multiple rumors about where the name comes from, but it basically means blue from France. One argument is that the grapes look rather blue, and for some reason they thought that these grapes were from France. But the more recent story that I heard, which is maybe a more interesting story, is that when Napoleon was like traveling through this area and probably conquering things, his like army would pay for wine with blue French banknotes, and so it was called a Kékfrankos or a Blaufränkisch. It was like a blue French banknote that was the equivalent of one bottle of Blaufränkisch or Kékfrankos. So it was sort of like a one-for-one thing. So it just ended up being named after this currency. I don't know if that's totally made up, but that's honestly on like the Austrian wine website. So I'm gonna
go with it.
I've never heard it until honestly 2 weeks ago, and I've been like a Austrian wine geek for as long as I can remember. Anyways, this grape variety for me is kind of this ultimate hybrid of the qualities of Syrah and Merlot. It has the spice and sort of minerality of like really good Syrah with sort of the plushness and softness of Merlot. It's like a lot of sommeliers have been talking about this being like the ultimate grape variety for the past 50 years. So the fact that it hasn't caught on is probably due to the fact that the name is hard to pronounce for English speakers, not because of the quality being any less than anywhere else.
Well, we're going to get to geek out about that really hard when we get to the next wine. Let's focus on the other two minor varieties, the St. Laurent and the Zweigelt.
Yeah, totally. So Zweigelt for me is sort of like Blaufränkisch's like more playful cousin. It tends to be juicier. It tends to have more red fruit characteristics as opposed to the black fruit characteristics that we're getting from Blaufränkisch. And it tends to be, you can usually make it like as a lighter bodied style wine, something that's like juicier for younger drinking. There are some pretty like badass versions of it, but for the most part, it makes sort of like younger drinking, easier styles of wine. And then Saint Laurent or Saint Laurent is the hardest grape in the world to grow. Apparently, it's even more finicky than Pinot Noir. So a lot of people have kind of given up on it because it's just so susceptible to rot, so susceptible to mildew. But when you get a good one, they're so ethereal and pretty. They very much are like Pinot Noir. Like they're very delicate. They're very light in color. So a lot of people that we talk to are like, we can't actually farm Saint Laurent for like a low enough amount of money to actually sell it for how much we do, but we like it so much that we do it anyways. So it's.
Do you have anything coming into Alberta that's 100% Saint Laurent?
No, not at the moment.
Not yet.
Yeah, we used to get one from Mindklang that was really good, but they were the same way. They're like, honestly, we can't afford to farm this anymore. Like, it's just, we'd have to charge a fortune for it. They kept losing it to like frost and hail and rots and things like that. Yeah, I can't think of one that's 100% at the moment. We do have the Abend or Abend, I don't know the correct pronunciation, but from Mindklang, that's mostly Saint Laurent, but it's also got Zweigelt in it as well. So, yeah, no 100% Saint Laurent at the moment.
I'm looking forward to trying one of those completely ethereal wine experiences because I've never had 100% Saint Laurent before. So,
yeah, there's a couple available on the market. I'm trying to think of the one with like the microbes on the front of the bottle, Gruber or something or other. Saint Laurent. Yeah,
it's not coming to mind for me either.
Yeah,
probably one of those bad memory days. So,
that's me every day. So.
Well, this is an excellent question. Let's get everybody to start pouring the Balf Kékfrankos in their glasses, and I'll ask Erik a quick question here. Could this be viable in Canadian vineyards?
Oh yeah, and it is planted. There are quite a few vineyards in the Okanagan that have planted Blaufränkisch in particular, although you do see some Zweigelt as well, and I believe some Saint Laurent. I believe Nickel actually has some Saint Laurent on their property in Naramata, which is pretty hilarious. And
that sounds amazing,
I think,
actually.
There's quite a few places with Blaufränkisch planted. You see it a lot in the Finger Lakes in New York State, and they call it Lemberger there. So they've chosen the German name for it because this grape variety has so many names. In other countries, it's called Frankovka. So it has honestly 4 different names that are commonly used. But yeah, we see it a lot out east. So, I think that it's going to become more and more popular in the Okanagan because it is so viable. Just once people get over the name.
That's fair. I've seen it labeled as Blaufränkisch before, which is definitely easier to say, but
definitely.
Yeah, I kind of don't love it either. But
yeah, it's one of those tricky things. There's a lot of grape varieties that are just never going to catch on because their names are too challenging. We got to find a way of shortening it to 2 syllables because that's the thing. Is like people like 2 syllable names.
Good old Kékfrank. Yep.
Yeah.
It's like Cab Frank, but way better. Yeah.
Totally.
Screw it.
Actually, that's kind of a good call. Yeah. That was like in the 90s, they tried to change Gruner Veltliner, which is another Austrian grape variety, into Groovy.
Yes, I'm familiar with this.
Oh, the advertising was so bad.
Yes, it was.
But I love it so much. The idea that like the Austrian wine board was like, oh yeah, everybody's going to want to drink groovy wine. And this is the 90s, about 20 years too late for that particular slang term. But it's so good.
I did love some of the labels that came out of that. They came in kind of the early the late 2000s, early 2010s, they would have really like psychedelic hippie themes just to make fun of this. And we had wines like the Grooves, and we had Groovy. It was awesome. It was if you knew the history and how ridiculous it was really great. Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. So this has been borderline our best-selling red wine of about the last year and change, maybe year 15 months. It's the Weninger Balf Kékfrankos. We absolutely love this. It's everything I want in a wine. It's got richness, it's got body, it's got a really pretty peppery note, it's got great acidity, it's got a beautiful, beautiful character. Just, I don't really find anything to really nitpick about this wine for. I would have it potentially, I don't know if I'd have this lightly chilled, but I'd have it on its own with a meal, on a horse in a something, I don't know, I was trying to make a green eggs and ham joke and it didn't work out. But yeah, let's go. Yeah, it went. Shut up, Aaron. But let's talk about this. Let's distract from me having to say anything for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess the difference between the last wine that we just had, which is grown in the exact same area as this particular wine. So the Gneisz És Csillám is a blend of different grape varieties. You have Syrah, you have Kékfrankos, you have Merlot, and you have a bit of Zweigelt, I believe. Versus the Balf Kékfrankos is 100% Kékfrankos. This is sort of their like next level up from the Gneisz És Csillám. The Gneisz És Csillám is sort of their like amalgamation of grapes from that particular soil type. Versus this is like, we want to give you as clear a picture as we possibly can of this like micro region called Balf. So Balf is located basically just outside of Sopron. Sopron, if you sort of think of it as like the classic wine town, could potentially be considered the heart of Burgenland, which is the region in Austria that sort of wraps all the way around it. Like if you look at the border, it's literally like Austria, 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 and then this little like nub is where Sopron is in Hungary, and that's where this comes from.
Yeah, it was like the last loyal county, because they had a referendum after the First World War as to who wanted to be in Austria and who wanted to be in Hungary, and all of their neighbors said Austria and only Sopron said Hungary, and that's why they're kind of this thumb sticking into Austria.
Totally, yeah. Actually, also, where Bratislava is in Slovakia was also part of that, and they decided to be part of Slovakia instead of remaining part of Hungary. And then the three other counties, they moved over to being part of Austria. So I think they call it like Loyal Sopron is like the local name. They're like the most loyal town in Hungary, and they're all very, very proud of their Hungarian heritage, even though most of them actually speak German as well as Hungarian, which is pretty cool, and English, and probably also like French and Italian, because they're in Europe and everybody seems to be able to speak all the languages. Anyway, so yeah, this particular wine is Kékfrankos, planted on gneiss and mica schist, so the exact same soils that we had, one wine ago, but focusing just on Kékfrankos, focusing on older vines. So the oldest vines in this, I think, are about 45 years old. So definitely getting quite a bit older. Some of their top wines are made from vines that are exclusively 60 plus years old, which is pretty cool. And yeah, this is just like a focus on that grape variety. They're fermenting this in open top fermenters. So they take the grapes, they destem most of them, so they take them off the stems. There's a machine that does that. They don't have to do it by hand, thank goodness. Although some people do still hand destem grapes, which is crazy.
Madness. Yeah, absolute madness.
Absolute madness. Yeah, their pricing model doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, so they destem the grapes. They put them in basically like a large open top wood barrel is basically what it looks like. They ferment it in there, and then once it's done fermenting, they put it into barrel. And what makes Franz's wines really cool is that he takes the barrels and he actually flips them almost on their side, so that like the bung hole, which is normally on the top of the barrel, is actually like underneath the line of the wine. And this prevents evaporation, at least a lot of evaporation. And he basically like locks it in there for a super long period of time. Sometimes he won't even check it for like years. And then he'll eventually flip it back over, check the wine. If it's tasting good, that's great. If not, he'll add maybe a little bit of sulfur to it, just to make sure that it stays stable. If it's really not tasting good, then he'll chuck it, but that doesn't really happen that often. But it's sort of this he just has like infinite trust in, he's like, I made the wine as good as it can possibly be. Now I'm going to let it take care of itself. And this is what makes his wines really stable. So even though this wine is, 20 something dollars, I would easily put this in my cellar for like 5-10 years and not really be that worried about it. That's what's amazing about his wines, is they're extraordinarily stable.
And he loves this grape variety. He's made, at least for our store, 8 different expressions of Kékfrankos, Blaufränkisch over the years, and maybe there's some we've missed.
Yeah, he does a bunch of different single vineyard Blaufränkisches. We don't even bring them all in because honestly, there's so many, and some of them get to a price level that would be challenging to sell in Canada, where appreciation for Blaufränkisch hasn't quite risen to the level of sort of the.
I don't know. I sold a Steiner this morning. I'm having no troubles at all.
Totally.
But yeah.
Exactly.
But let's actually talk about Steiner. I mean, Steiner's kind of thought to be like the great vineyard of Hungary, at least as far as Kékfrankos is concerned. And he obviously does play there. He has not only a Steiner Kékfrankos, he also has a Steiner ferment. Grape variety we didn't talk about tonight because we're not doing, whites. But let's talk about the Steiner vineyard a little bit, because you do get some wines from there from Franz Weninger.
Yeah, so the Steiner Vineyard is basically in the same region as this, but the site is sort of like the most extreme version of everything we just talked about. So like the Gneisz and mica schist there is very pure, very intense. It's a very rocky site, really well-draining soils, and it's basically getting pummeled with wind all the time. It's quite a cool site, and because of that, they get extraordinarily low yields. So if you think about, like a region like, the places in northern Italy that are making Pinot Grigio or making Prosecco, you're able to get, 5 to 10, maybe even more than that, tons of grapes per acre. Versus I can't remember which vintage it was maybe like 2016, 2015. He was getting sort of like a half ton per acre of grapes. So you can think about the economics there. But you can imagine that all that land is putting its entire effort into making just a half ton of grapes. So you can imagine how much more flavorful, how much more intense, how much more pure that wine is going to be. It's not diluted. It's just really intensely flavored. And so for me, Steiner is or Steiner, I think, correct pronunciation. I'm really bad at these Hungarian pronunciations.
We'll get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the ultimate expression of Kékfrankos for me. It's as good as any wine in the Northern Rhone. So think like Hermitage, think Côte Rôtie, think the best vineyards in Saint-Joseph or Cornas. It's very much in that style. It's like very peppery, very rocky, not quite austere, but definitely like gritty. And that's the thing that I love about that wine, is that it's ferocious. It's unyielding. It's aggro in all the best ways.
You have to go to it. It's never going to come to you. You're going to like it like it is, but it is never going to be generous about anything.
Totally. And we get 30 bottles a year for probably all of Canada, maybe at least all of Alberta. We can clump Saskatchewan together with that. So at least all of Alberta and Saskatchewan. We only
gave us 12, which I'm very grateful for. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we try and make sure we get you guys all the Blaufränkisch and Kékfrankos you could possibly need. So,
well, we sell quite enough of it, and ones like this I would say are really very much why. Although I will say, I would have said before tonight, in a vacuum, I would take this 100 times in 100 over the Gneisz És Csillám. I've got to say, the bottle that's in front of me tonight, at least, is showing shockingly well.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to like that as much as I did, just even against the Balf. I was not expecting that. That's very impressive. The Balf shows exactly like it usually does, but that showed very well.
It's a ludicrously good wine. Like, I am constantly blown away by it. It's I try and pour it for as many people as possible, and especially without telling them the price, and they always assume that it's a lot more money than it is, because
it
Franz
tastes
is
like a lot more money than it is.
So this is we sort of briefly touched on it in the fact that he's not adding anything to his wines, he's not taking anything away, but he's also farming biodynamically. He's been certified for quite a while now, but he recently got certified by Demeter, as well as Respect, which is sort of like the other certification body for biodynamic wines in Austria and Hungary. And, this is like a way more challenging farming process. but you're being way better for the environment. You're not using pesticides and herbicides the same way. He's fermenting things like chamomile and horsetail and nettles and yarrow and using those in the vineyard instead of harsh chemicals. And so the amount of work that he actually has to put in is extraordinary. So the fact that this wine is sort of in the low 20s and drinks as well as it does, people are always just like blown away by the price to quality ratio.
Beautiful. I'm just going to briefly step in to talk about what we got coming up next week. No wine tasting next week. We have a beer tasting happening, though. This is our Oktoberfest event. And this event, happily, very happily, best of all worlds, does not include an Oktoberfest beer because Oktoberfest beers are boring. We do have 2 from Germany, 2 from Canada. From Annex Brewing, we have their Ship-Shape Munich Dunkel, along with Hefeweizen. This is one of the 2 kind of classic Bavarian styles. Banana clove root beer into banana bread. Very, very, very pleasant, rich, mouth-filling, wintry beers. From Establishment Brewing, also out of Calgary, we have the Munich Gold Helles, which to me tastes like the perfect hopless beer. It obviously has some hopping, but to me, hops means IPA. Hops means power. This is a malt-focused, grain-focused beer right up front, and it's so crackery and so rich and so caramelly. I absolutely love this. From Germany, we're going with Hacker Shore. We're going to do the traditional Bavarian Weiss beer, so also known as Hefeweizen. It's cloudy, it's lemony, it's bright, it uses that traditional Bavarian yeast. It should be very, very interesting. And then finally, we'll get back to Keller beer, a style I don't think we've ever done on the beer tastings before because it's very unusual. This was known as a cellar beer, so they would hop it a little more aggressively like a Pilsner or like an IPA, but it wouldn't be lagered at the brewery necessarily, and it certainly wasn't designed to be drank fresh. This was something, you'd pick up your case of beer for the week, and then you'd take a case of this and put it under the stairs, and in 3 months or in 6 months you might get to it because it would have changed, and it would have evolved, and it would become more delicate. It's obviously not a style that really anyone does anymore. The only North American style Keller beer, real Keller beer I can remember, was won by Les Trois Mousquetaires out of Quebec. There was a brief trend about 3 years ago of people calling their timidly hopped lagers Keller beers, but that was just cowardice in brewing form, so I don't actually count it. But let's jump right along here merrily into the Vom Kalk, and let's jump over to the Austrian side of the border here.
Yeah, so we've had one wine that's from both Austria and Hungary in the rosé. Then we've had 2 wines that are exclusively from Hungary, and now we're going back to Austria, and this is exclusively from Austria. Again, keep in mind that all these vineyards are within a half an hour drive of one another. So we're really talking about the same region. It just happens to be on different sides of the border, and there's micro changes in soil type from place to place. So in this case, we're talking about kalk, which is limestone. Limestone, I think a lot of people would argue, is the end-all be-all of wine soil types. As the soil, for some weird reason, it tends to help the grapes preserve their acidity. And for winemakers and wine geeks, acidity is the most important thing that a wine can have. It's the backbone of the wine. It's like salt. It's what makes the wine taste like anything at all. A wine that's too low in acidity just tastes flat, like the same way as something that's not salted enough. And so limestone is great at preserving acidity, but you can still get the wines amply ripe. So unlike a different soil type where it's once the grapes are fully ripe, it has no acidity, so they either have to add acid or harvest earlier while the grapes still have acidity but not as much flavor. In limestone, you get the best of both worlds. So what I often find with Vom Kalk in particular is that it's super powerful but still has freshness. This is the wine for the Bordeaux lover, in my opinion. For me, if I were to have this in a blind tasting, I probably 9 out of 10 times I would guess that it's from the right bank of Bordeaux, where you see Merlot dominant blends with a little bit of Cab Franc, maybe Cabernet Sauvignon, things like that blended in.
It's so floral. It's shockingly floral.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's charming with this the lightest touch of real vanilla bean with the flowers and the fruit. It's just so eminently pleasant. It's not as serious as the Kékfrankos. It's not as immediately charming as the Gneisz És Csillám, but it's just immediately likable. It's like a hug, and I quite like it for that.
Totally, yeah. And I think that's the characteristic of Merlot, where it's. I think that people underestimate how good Merlot is as a grape variety.
Oh, I think they definitely do. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's like everything that people describe that they want in wine, they can get out of Merlot, but they don't want to drink Merlot. Like Merlot has like the softness that you want, like those, still tannins, but the tannins are very sort of chocolatey, kind of Ovaltine vibes going for it, which is something that I really like. It can be a little bit floral. It has all these red fruit characteristics to it. It can be kind of plummy. And like, plum in wine is just such an endearing quality as far as I'm concerned. It can have that elusive strawberry note that, again, I think is so fantastic in wine that's, again, very underrated. There's also a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon in here, which is giving it maybe a little bit more backbone, bringing out some of those darker fruit characteristics. There's a little bit of Saint Laurent in here, or St. Laurent, depending on who you're talking to, which is adding freshness, a little bit extra acidity, again, a floral element to it, some minerality perhaps. And then I believe, at least according to their website, there's some Blaufränkisch in here as well. I don't know how much there's actually hiding in here. They don't like to, release their 10 special herbs and spices or whatever it happens to be, but there might be a little bit of that thrown in there as well. But yeah, same winemaking process for all the red wines here. So they're all just mostly destemmed, fermented in open top tank, and then put into barrel for X amount of time, depending on whenever the wine's ready. That's when he bottles it. There's no formula that he's looking for. He just keeps tasting it, and so that's why we have back vintages of Gneisz És Csillám, because like that's when this wine was ready to drink. Yeah. I will say on the Merlot thing, just you've worked on the retail side before, and buying Merlot, trying to find Merlot to buy is absolutely a fool's errand. Nobody brings it in. If they do bring it in, they never show it to you. If they do show it to you, it's usually in that awful Californian 80s style. Right now, if somebody came in and said, I want Pinot at any price. Sure, I want Cabernet at any price. Absolutely. I want Kékfrankos at any price. Sure. Up to the point where Kékfrankos stops being expensive. Really, Merlot is really hard to buy in Alberta, and has been for a few years. Is that a winery issue? Is that a importer issue? Or is that just, I'm not looking hard enough, I'm down in Lethbridge, so I don't see all the reps? I'd say that Merlot is like, it's planted in a lot of vineyards. If you look at like a ratio of how much Merlot is planted in the world, there is a lot of Merlot, but you very rarely see it on the label. So it's like, in places like Chianti, you sneak in your 10% Merlot that you're legally allowed, and it makes your wine taste better. If you haven't done, if you haven't nailed it with Sangiovese, it's hard to nail it with Sangiovese versus Merlot. It's way easier to make a better Merlot. Same thing with a Napa, like Napa Cab, it's probably 20% Merlot in a lot of cases, if not some Syrah or Petit Syrah or Zinfandel. So it's like, legally speaking, it only needs to be 75% Cab in order to be called Napa Cab.
I do love the American wine laws, because that's where madness lies. It's, you go to Germany, it's like, well, this bottle might have accidentally seen some Gewürztraminer grapes. Well, then it's not Riesling. California, well, it's probably 26 Merlot. Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that most people have decided to blend away their Merlot instead of making it into a wine on its own, because it's so hard to sell. So that's the thing, is like, winemakers still agree that Merlot is delicious. Consumers still agree that Merlot is delicious, but they're not willing to buy it. They're willing to agree that it's delicious as long as they don't know what it is, I think is what it comes down to. I think that's
fair. We got a really great question. Did Sideways wreck Merlot? And I'll take this one first, and I'll let you answer. No, Sideways was speaking to an already existing perception in wine circles that Merlot was flabby and overly oaked and overly sweet, usually had too much alcohol, especially from Chile and California. Even from a bad winery, the Cabernet Sauvignon or the Sauvignon Blanc, and I'm speaking specifically to Chile here, would taste like something. Even the Chardonnay would be at least varietally correct. The Merlot would usually be their lowest common denominator wine, their apothic red. It's red, and it's mostly sweet, and it's got some oak, and it's got things that people broadly like, so let's label it Merlot, and that's good enough. And I think what Sideways was reacting to was a philosophy of rather forgiving, if I'm being kind, winemaking on how they made Merlot. A lot of errors that shouldn't have slipped through did in the name of selling a lot of bulk wine. And as a result, it became kind of an in-joke in the wine industry, you know, anything but Merlot, up to a point long before Sideways touched it. Ironically, by the time Sideways got to it, everybody in the wine business was already back on Merlot because some other producers had said, you know, no, this is ridiculous. This grape has quality. We need to be doing something better. I think that Sideways didn't ruin Merlot. I think that Merlot was already to a point ruined, and that's more what they were making fun of. Eric?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm a little torn. I think that Sideways might have ruined Merlot.
Yeah?
I think that at least it ruined its viability as like something that's sellable. I don't think it made Merlot any worse or anything like that. But yeah,
no, that damage had already been done.
Yeah, I remember after the Somme documentary came out on Netflix, the first one, and basically every single person on the Somme documentary, who are, again, the best in the world at what they do when it comes to wine, they were like, yeah, Beaujolais is the best thing of all time, which we had been telling people for
absolute ever. Yes, I know.
And nobody believed us, and nobody would buy Beaujolais. And then that movie came out, and this is when I was working in retail, and then every second person who came in was like, I saw in the Somme documentary that Beaujolais is the best thing, and that's what I should be drinking. So can I get a bottle of Beaujolais? And I think I'm like,
I think good luck selling them Fleury.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. They didn't say Fleury in the documentary.
Yeah, exactly. So I think us as a society, we're super susceptible to, especially when in situations where we don't have knowledge, like we see it now, where like every single time we read a news article, we take it as fact, especially if we don't know ourselves about that particular subject matter. And I think it's the same thing, especially with wine, where wine is so intimidating. So you hear one person who sounds like they know what they're talking about say something, and you're like, okay, I'm going to grasp onto that like little nugget of information, and I'm going to take that as a truth, and I'm just going to run with that. And you know, I'm susceptible to that in everything else that I do. Like I try and geek out about coffee, but I don't know that much about it, and so like the information that I have is from my friends, and I hang on to those little nuggets like they are, you know, unbreakable truths. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I think that a lot of people who watch that, who are like, you know, fringe wine drinkers, were like, well, at least now I know when I go into the store not to ask for Merlot because that guy in that movie said that it was bad. And like that's fair. That's, you know, I'm equally susceptible to that sort of thing. So
see, I looked at perhaps the Merlots that were available on the market at that time. I look at that. Sorry, there's something happening in the background. I'm not entirely sure what it is. But I look at what was really available in the market at the time. I looking at the Merlot market at the moment where Sideways came out, or perhaps at the moment where Sideways would have been written, which was probably 5 years earlier. Mm-hmm. I don't blame them. If I was looking at the Merlot section in any wine store on earth in, say, 2002, 2003, unless I was specifically buying Right Bank Bordeaux, no, not for anything. Not for anything on earth.
Wasn't the reason why he hated Merlot because it reminded him of his like ex-wife or something like that, though? I thought that was like the thing where he didn't actually dislike Merlot. It was like it just reminded him of like some sort of situation. I don't really remember the movie.
I feel like I think I was most of the way through a bottle of wine when I actually started Sideways, and I continued to drink wine through it. So I remember the whole anti-Merlot thing, and I was like, right on, man. Like commercial Merlot is terrible. Man, I want a pizza. That was broadly my Sideways experience. I've only ever seen it the once. And I was honestly, it's a bit of a dull film by and large. It's not that great a film.
I remember. I don't know, sort of enjoying it, maybe.
Really? Do tell. No, sort of enjoy it. Go on.
I don't know. Again, I'm like you. I don't really remember it quite as well as I should.
That's probably.
It was very early in the wine drinking career where I was just like, I should watch this. It's a movie about wine.
And that's literally why I watched it as well. It's a thing about wine. People are talking about it. You know, the other big one I can think of is when Under the Tuscan Sun came out as a novel, and everyone on Earth decided Prosecco was all they ever wanted to drink forever. We went from having like, you know, a bottle of Prosecco down on the bottom shelf next to like the Henkel Trocken and the Freixenet, and you know, it was there. Someone really asked, but it was like, you know, how often does somebody ask for it? But as often as they asked for like absinthe. And then all of a sudden it was like we had to have a shelf like an arm's width shelf of Prosecco almost overnight, and they all sold. And they still sell. Good, bad, and indifferent. Yeah. They all still sell.
Fair. Yeah. Nice. I wish people got more of their drinking habits from books, though, because people read like some Hemingway and then just they want to drink sherry and champagne and absinthe. I'm like,
oh man, yeah, I'd be really on board with that.
That would be great if that just blew up and all of a sudden everybody was drinking champagne and, you know, drinking absinthe and sherry became popular again. Like I'd be very into that.
Speaking of, it's now officially tangent o'clock. Did you see that Tio Pepe has a couple of new phenos that are actually really good?
I did not see this.
Yeah, they have like a totally unmucked with unfiltered Tio Pepe, and then they have a much older version, and neither of them are desperately expensive, and they're both great. I was shocked.
Tio Pepe's always been good.
I completely agree, but these are past good. They're quite great.
Yeah, nice. I love that. Sherry is the best deal in the wine
world. By miles, yes.
Yeah. It's criminally inexpensive, I would say.
Yes, for how much effort goes into it, yes, I agree.
Yeah, you're like, here's a 7-year-old bottle of wine. It'll be $13.
Yeah,
like,
and please buy it. We really just need to feed our families.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're just still making this so that we can sell the barrels to the
whiskey industry.
Yeah, exactly, to the Scotch industry. They're like, if you could just drink enough of this that we can sell our barrels, that would be fantastic. So, just got to keep drinking sherry if you want that Scotch to keep existing. So that's the moral of the story. To all you out there.
Hey, we could do a sherry tasting that would be you and me and like our 5 diehards. It'd be fun though.
It would be fun.
And we could do it for like pennies on the dollar because we could do the best like phenos on earth and still come in at $60.
You could offer like 7 bottles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you and I would not survive 7 bottles of sherry.
No,
so let's kind of work our way through these a little bit. So we've got the Rózsa Petsovits, we've got the Gneisz És Csillám, we've got the Kékfrankos, and then we've got the Vom Kalk. What else is out there that you absolutely love Franz Weninger for? And then beyond that, what have you got coming? What are people going to see in the next few months? I now realize I should have asked before the tasting if you had a PO landing, but what have you got coming from these guys that we're all going to be very excited about?
Totally. So yeah, other things from Franz Weninger, he makes a lot of different wines. He makes like 20-something different wines. We carry a lot of them. Of his single vineyard things, we usually get very small amounts. I'd say that if you're looking for like a Christmas gift for somebody, we bring in his Hockacker, which is like a single vineyard Blaufränkisch. That is like the most massive, like rotund kind of version of Blaufränkisch. For me, it's like for the cab drinker in your life, like somebody who wants like a big, powerful, knock you over style of wine, like the bull in the china shop kind of wine.
So my dad, yeah,
exactly. We get it only in magnums. We've decided that we're only importing that wine in 1.5 liter bottles, and it's like fairly inexpensive. Like it's the same price as his top level Blaufränkisch, but in twice the size of bottle. So I'd say that's something super cool that you should get your hands on. We get 15 bottles a year, so not a lot to go around, but that's like kind of like a special little thing.
We still have one, so we're good.
Yeah, exactly.
At least one.
Yeah. I think you guys have the last vintage, so we got the new vintage in, which is fun. Their white wines are honestly sensational. So Franz basically decided that he wanted to go into vineyards that were planted with grape varieties that shouldn't be there. So things like Cab and Merlot and Syrah and Pinot Noir. And I think there might have been some white grapes in there, like Sauvignon Blanc or something. And he grafted, so he like basically sawed off the grapevine and then grafted on a different grapevine on top, which is the classical white grape of the region, which is Furment. Furment is like Riesling. It's like bright, it's super mineral, really poised, quite high acid, but not in an offensive way. And we got in his first ever release of ferment, 2 different ones. So we got in the Vom Kalk ferment, which is the equivalent of the Vom Kalk that you have in front of you, but the white version that he made like a couple hundred bottles. Like it's very small production. And then we got the Steiner ferment, which is that vineyard that we were talking about earlier, that is arguably the best vineyard in all of Hungary. And he's the first person to be at least in like 100 years, to be making ferment off of this vineyard, as far as I know.
We have the Vom Kalk ferment on the shelf. We have some Steiner ferment, which I've noticed is living exclusively in a box under Devon's desk, because I think he's hiding it in the hopes that no one will notice, and he's just going to drink it for him. So if you want the Steiner ferment, please come in, ask for Devon, and make him drag it out from under his desk in shame for hiding it.
Yeah. So yeah, those are really cool. And then on like the flip side, if you really like the rosé and you like that sort of more experimental style, the wine that we have from that experimental style, I can't even pronounce. I have no idea how to pronounce it. But it's part of the Franz Play series, and it's an orange wine from him.
Yes.
So it's a skin fermented wine.
It came down to me doing that or this, and it came down to, do we actually make our costs back or lose 30 cents a tasting? That was literally, it was almost in here. But yeah, it was one of those just barely things. Yeah,
totally. But yeah, as far as orange wine goes, it's a fantastic price point. I don't know what it is on the shelf there, but somewhere in the low $30 range. Super cool wine, really textural. Good introduction into what orange wine is supposed to be, in my opinion. And we only got 60 bottles, so it's sort of a one-off. I'm not sure if he's ever making it ever again, frankly. So it might just be 60 bottles ever. So definitely worth getting your hands on a bottle of that if you're into it. And then we don't really have anything new coming in the next little bit, other than we're getting in the new vintage of his hopped rosé.
Oh yeah.
So
that never actually saw our shelves. That got drank up by me and Devon and Hand and Nigel and some other people. It didn't ever see the shelves, unfortunately. Maybe one or two people got one.
Like 24 bottles of it.
Yeah, 24 for the province, and we all wanted that.
Yeah, I think like between like us, we've drank it all. But basically the idea was in one of their vineyards next to the Blaufränkisch, there's a bunch of wild hops growing. And so they're ripe at the same time. So he's like, why don't we just take all these things and put them together?
How much are you getting this year of the heck was that called?
I don't remember what it was called.
I don't either. It was really cool. I had it.
The packaging's amazing.
The packaging's amazing. It's got the little crown cap. Yeah. Devin will probably remember.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming to my head right now. But anyways, super cool wine. We'll be getting that, if not on our next shipment, then on the following shipment. Mostly just restock.
Vinegar, and otherwise, what else do you have coming in that people should be really excited about for Christmas?
Well, you guys are getting an exclusive champagne from us.
We are.
That's
indeed.
The thing that they should be most excited about, is that we were able to get an allocation of Christophe Mignon, who's one of my favorite producers of all time. Basically every year, when I went to go visit my father, who lives out of province, where he lives, we're able to get a particular, like, we can order in Christophe Mignon champagne. And every year on either Christmas morning or New Year's Day, we drink a bottle of Christophe Mignon champagne. And this has been for like the last 4 years. And not only that, but every time I go to like New York or wherever on a work trip, I drink this champagne. So I basically sent them an email being like, hey, here's like 10 pictures of me drinking your champagne on all like my special occasions. Will you sell us some for Alberta? And they're like, this is the most adorable thing of all time. Yes, we'll show you a little bit of wine. And so because we knew we couldn't get a lot of it, we sort of reached out to just a couple of our friends, and we're like, hey, we want to give you first dibs. And so obviously Andrew Hilton was included in that sort of collective. And so it's only going to be available at 3 stores in all of Alberta. But the cool thing is that their champagne's focused on Pinot Meunier, which is they're in the Val de la Marne, so which is a Pinot Meunier region, basically. Although they do also do a little bit of Pinot Noir and a little bit of Chardonnay as like straight up like varietal champagnes. They're just magnificent and not insanely expensive. They're extraordinarily cheap, actually, for what they are. Like I think like the entry level one is going to be no more than $70 on the shelf. So, and for like
for champagne, that's really quite entry level. Yes,
totally, and especially with like the winemaking that they're, or I guess more so the grape growing that they're doing, where they're harvesting based on moon cycles and all these sort of things that are really cool. So that's awesome. Sicilian wine that we talked about, getting in some very inexpensive Sicilian wines.
Just gonna stop here for a sec. The hopped rosé is Glimmer of Hops. Thank you, Mark.
Glimmer of Hops.
Yep, thank you,
How
Mark.
could we forget that?
Yeah, might have to do with all of this Austro-Hungarian wine in front of me that I've drank. But yes, might have something to do with it. Anyway, Sicily.
After this, which is why he's watching.
Yeah.
He's like, when can I come over? He's pre-drinking for drinking with me after this by watching this, I think.
Nice.
And sending in heckly comments, I'm sure.
I hope I could use more heckly comments.
I know.
We used to get more heckling early on. I think everybody's like so nice now. We used to people be really trolly and mean, and it was funny. But that's all right.
We did that. Yeah. Fantastic. But yeah, we're getting in some Sicilian wine that I think we might do a tasting with you guys for. So that would be really fun.
That would be. Yeah, we talked about this off camera. Some of the Sicilians sound really cool. I can't wait. And Sicily's such a cool place to talk about. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, Sicily. So the things I had to learn about in a textbook, which are Grillo and Nero d'Avola. And there's so much more. There's so much more. There's Norello Mascalese. There's so much going on. Like, I love Sicily. Yeah. I can't wait.
Totally. Me too. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a really fun one potentially. So, we'll have that figured out. But yeah, lots of new stuff. Maybe a little Jura, which I know you're going to lose your mind over.
Yes, I am, but I have no idea how to fit. It's like, welcome to our weekly wine tasting. The cost is $85. Here's your bottle of wine. Welcome to Jura. No, it's not that bad, but it'd be two. Yeah. It would probably be two.
Obviously, it's not going to go in a wine tasting.
Yeah, but I know what you mean.
We're happy to drink it.
We are very happy to drink Jura. Have we done anything from Jura on the channel at all? I don't know that we have, I mean,
I think
cost,
it's a hard
obviously.
Based on price point. Yeah, it'd definitely have to be a 3-bottle week if you used anything from Jura.
Yeah, it would. I'd still like to try and pull it off, though.
Yeah.
Not sure how the hell I'm going to do that, but I'd still like to pull it off.
We'll make it happen.
I will look forward to your $20 a bottle LTO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Half price. Yeah, definitely. But what's your favorite of the night? What's a standout for you?
Ooh.
I know people like to ask that, so I'm trying to be a good.
No, I usually don't when we have a guest because I think it's rude. To me, well, I mean, when I finished, part of it might be the super, super hot lights, but I actually went back to the Rózsa Petsovits. I genuinely enjoyed all of the reds, particularly the Kékfrankos, and this a lot more than I liked. Honestly, I liked everything, but this, which I think I talked the least about, I went back to immediately. I think on a visceral level, like, I respect these perhaps more because I know the history and everything else. This I went back to because it's just really nice to drink.
Totally. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people are starting to realize in the wine industry, that the wines that are maybe like academically the best are not always the ones that we want to drink. So it's like, yes, that Balf Kékfrankos is like the epitome of what a red wine on a particular soil type is supposed to taste like. But every once in a while, it's like a rosé just tastes darn good. It just tastes really delicious, and you just want to drink it, and it's like, that's what I want. So it's Devin
and I both had like a come to Jesus moment about our shared like filthy oaked California Chardonnay habit, and it was like, I don't care. I like Rombauer. I to a certain point we could drink Kendall Jackson happily forever. I like that style. I don't feel good about liking that style, but I like that style.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we can. We all have our guilty habit wines. So
yes,
I feel like.
What's your guilty habit wine there, Eric? What's your guilty habit wine? Do you have like a raging like Barossa Shiraz boner or something? Wow, I should stop drinking. We can edit that out, right? They come out in post. Oh God.
Yeah, you're not far off with that. I have a huge Grenache obsession.
Just turn the red up in his cheeks.
Oh wow. Sorry, I'm not paying attention at all at the moment.
I'm trying to be like.
No, thank you for covering for me.
Professional.
Yeah, no, I'd say that Grenache is definitely one of the secret obsessions. I think Grenache is one of those grape varieties that can hold its alcohol really well. So it's like Grenache, even at like 15% alcohol, like sign me up. I like a big Grenache. Like it's just, I don't know, it's just the way it is. And
it
same thing
can
with
be
Chardonnay.
very pleasant,
like
yes.
I'm with you on the I think we've talked about this before, where it's like Schaefer Red Shoulder Ranch, even though it's Schaefer and it's 15% alcohol Chardonnay from California, and it's like $100 a bottle. That's still one of my favorite wines of all time. I think the natural wine world might, banish me after saying that. But
there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, no. Yeah. I assume I'm now banned from every polite wine channel in history. So.
Yeah.
No, I've turned in all my wine cards. It's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think we all have a little bit of a guilty pleasure when it comes to certain wines. And I always have my own biases. We tasted, Dev and I tasted an absolutely spectacular, better than Grosset Australian Riesling. And I got really whiny and told you so-y because it didn't taste like a Rheingau. I think it was just in a weird mood that day. I'd had too much coffee, but I was like, well, it doesn't taste like this Rheingau Riesling at less money. It's like, yeah, but the German wine industry's been depressed for 30 years. Well, that doesn't matter. It's Riesling versus Riesling. I don't know. I was insufferable that day. But I have my that day. Thank you. But well said.
Do you have a live studio audience right now?
Well, it's an audience of 2. It's Aaron and Hand, and honestly, an audience of hundreds, because they're very funny and they're very sharp, and I appreciate that.
We need a musical guest next time, I think. I feel like
musical guest is something we've actually discussed.
Studio band.
We actually had a conversation about that. Might happen someday. Be fun as a Christmas special. Set up an easy chair in the corner, have all our greatest hits come through, like yourself, and do it that way. It'd be funny. But yes. Yeah, unless you have any final comments, I'm going to slink off with my shame of the things I said on camera, and we'll call that a night.
Yeah, no, I think that's I guess maybe one shout out is that we do a natural wine club with you guys.
Yes, you do.
So if there's if you happen to like these wines and you want some sort of version of this, if you want to hear more of my voice, we with the wine club you get 3 bottles of wine every month. They're often wines that you can't get otherwise. It's literally just in the wine club. We get just enough of it to feed the people in the wine club. And then we record a podcast about those wines. So you don't even have to read anything if you don't want to. You can just, listen to me while you're in the car, sitting in traffic, driving to work or whatever it happens to be. And then we do a full newsletter write-up if you are on the geekier side of things and you want to learn about it. That write-up is usually 5 pages long and has tons and tons of information about the 3 wines. It's $100 a month. You can sign up for as long or as short as you want. So if you do it for 1 month and you hate it, you can unsubscribe, or if you love it, you can stay on for until you're 1,000 years old. So we'll hopefully be doing it for that long. But yeah, you can sign up on our website, which is just www.juiceimports.com. Yeah, I don't know. Follow us on Instagram. People like doing that. I don't know. Thank you guys for having me and supporting me as always.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I
couldn't do it without your guys.
I'll ask you to stick around for a couple of minutes while I wrap things up, and we'll debrief after this and talk about how weird I made this. So yeah, thank you, Eric. That was really nice of you. That was Erik Mercier of Juice Imports. He is, of course, the importer of Weninger wines here, and probably a solid quarter of the wines we carry here at the store, because he's just amazing and brings in really neat stuff. We have our beer tasting coming up on Wednesday, which is our Oktoberfest theme. We will have a new wine tasting for you in 2 weeks. I have not yet chosen what it is. That's part of why I want Eric to stick around, is to find some new fun stuff for us all to taste. Apologies for how weird I made it earlier. I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton. Please don't block us. This has been our Franz Weninger wine tasting on a very weird and surreal Friday night. Thank you all so much for watching, and good night.